What they're doing is usurping state authority and slapping everybody in the face in the process when they do it, by pulling the guard out and handing them right over to the United Nations. This is a final insult before tragedy strikes with regard to understanding what's happening inside the United States. This also takes many of the people, your brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, or relatives, out of the country so that they will not interfere with activities that may take place in the future if they have their way. Remember, the Guard, the one good thing is, they eat, breathe, and sleep with you. They're part of the community. They're there every day. It is hard to get them or convince them to turn around and mow down American citizens. They finally figured out they do not have the propaganda techniques or machine to turn the people away. And so what has happened is we are seeing a situation now where they've decided they're going to have to disperse the Guard more effectively and get them off into the boondocks, out to Egypt, off to wherever, to make sure that they will not interfere when new resources are brought in. The militia at large can organize at whatever size it wishes, but it must be loosely organized, and in fact the best of conditions anyway, as we've discussed, is dispersal. No large component is easily destroyed. No single component can be destroyed without all of the other elements knowing that an attack might take place. That is exactly... That is exactly what happened at Lexington and Concord. Whoops.
Come back here. Come on.
Oh, here.
Sorry about that, Mark.
That's okay. This one's tasty, too. It's just light meat. Anyway,
Watch out, you got fleas, Mark.
well, that's okay. I probably do, too. Oh, wait a minute. No, the important thing to understand here with the elements that we're discussing is that the militia at large experienced this before at Lexington and Concord. It was a militia at large unit at Lexington that originally faced the redcoat tide, stood on the green, and actually took the brunt of most fire at the time. When this took place, needless to say, they didn't win, but it was the shot heard around the world. They faced the most sophisticated military force on the planet at the time, fresh from victories in Europe. They were here to enforce firearms confiscation, excessive taxes. We've heard this all before, haven't we?
Sounds familiar.
Sounds familiar. Confiscation of property. One of the first things that they did at Lexington is the same thing they did at Concord. The British commanders allowed the troops to go in, take luggage, which was a booty prize at the time, just like we're seeing today with the way they're making it profitable to come into your home. They let them take the luggage, take the silver, take the VCR. Oops, it's a little early for that. But take whatever they wanted, and then they burned the home. Well, they did this to 14 to 16 structures there before they had to shuffle them on down the road. They were having so much fun, but they had other missions, they had other business to attend to. So they proceeded on to Concord, which was one of their primary targets. They were there to confiscate cannon, shot, powder, ball, and the owners.
They collected it.
Yeah, they collected it. They got the little parts. And so what happened is, of course,
lost their lives.
yeah, the town was virtually deserted, if you'll recall, when they came in. There were no occupants to identify. People had already left their homes and fled. And in the process, the British came in, and the British commander had one of his troops bring out a large chair, like a lounge chair. He sat down in the village square on the cobblestones and then told his men to do their duty. And they went a house at a time and cleaned it out of the valuables and then set it afire. They went house to house to house in the downtown area like this, where they started ravaging and pillaging the place. This was nothing new and was very traditional as punishment, by the way. Well, in the process, when they were finished, or as they initiated this, meanwhile, U.S. militia forces were gathering from all of the surrounding areas, and it is said as many as 10,000 responded total. Not all of them originally engaged in the action, but they did help to bottle up the British in Boston when they were finished. In the initial stages, as we know, they gathered on several of the overlying hills, and they could see the smoke of Concord. This, of course, burned in their hearts even greater the desire to engage this enemy who had come to pillage their homes. And so, first engaging them at the bridge, and then several other locations in town, the British decided to retreat, not being able to confiscate what they desired, and not being able to arrest anybody. So in the process, they were walked 1 foot at a time, all the way back, with blood on the ground, corpses on the cobblestone all the way back to Boston. The Patriots then, of course, bottled them up for a period of time. And in several attempts to try and break the blockade, for instance, we have what is known as the Battle of Bunker Hill, which in reality was Breed's Hill. Breed's Hill is where all the major fighting started. Bunker Hill was behind Breed's Hill, which were a series of bluffs overlooking the harbor. If these had been established as artillery positions, they could virtually command the ocean. And this was the fear of the British commanders. So they landed forces again, and yet another major attempt with amphibious forces, with present state-of-the-art technology, heavy weapons, etc. They engaged the hill, and they lost a 6-to-1 exchange ratio. For every one Patriot who fell, 6 of theirs fell. And even though they had no bayonets, and that's where they suffered the greatest number of casualties, by the way, that's why it's so symbolic they take the bayonet lug off your rifle, because at Breed's Hill, the defenses were set up so that the forces were unfortunately penned in, and when it came to hand-to-hand fighting, the British soldier was very adept with his bayonet, while the American soldier had his rifle to be used as a club or his personal tomahawk if he was lucky. This, of course, created a disadvantage because if you've ever seen a traditional Brown Bess or martial arm of the day, I've got a 7-foot spear, you've got a club. Who do you think wins? Well, they fell back from the position and restruck their ground near Bunker Hill, but the British, realizing the amount of casualties that they had received with the simple weapons in the hands of the American Patriot, decided that they could not hold, that ground successfully. That's why this SKS should have a bayonet, why all of your rifles should, if at all possible. The reason is very straightforward. Under the Geneva and Hague treaties, it states uncategorically that in order for you to be a military force, you must have, number 1, a uniform, 2, preferably an insignia, like the identifying insignias that we know are here today, and it can be a symbol of any kind that's appropriate, and that you must have a martial arm if at all possible. And a martial arm includes what? A bayonet. Why is it that the Gun Control Act of 1968 specifically stipulates that bayonets were a big no-no, that this was evil? Anybody hear of any bayonet charges between drug lords lately? Not very many. But on the other hand, if you were going to try and dictate that anybody who resists the New World Order is a pirate or a brigand or a thief or a terrorist, needless to say, you can't let them have martial arms, because under the Hague and Geneva Treaty, you are a combatant, not simply a brigand or a traitor or a treasonous monster or a thief or whatever. You're a soldier.
I cry for my country, for the pain that it's been through. She's been made to suffer for the profit of a few. Storm clouds are forming, winds of change now touch our shores. Our hear forefathers are crying as the dream's been cruised.